So I guess to get started, let's have a little look about how you actually start physical activity conversations, because obviously they can be challenging and sometimes you're not really sure when to do it. So I'm going to start with Sarah first. What do you kind of consider before you start approaching a conversation about physical activity with a patient?
It's really important, as with everything, to try and find out as much as you can about the patient's history, about their age. Can you glean any information about their lifestyle already from the notes that you've got in front of you? Because perhaps you might have a really good idea about what their exercise level or physical activity level is before they even walk in the room. And I think that it's important to try and get the conversation started earlier rather than later. But it may not be necessarily in the first consultation. But I'd probably start by trying to ascertain what level of exercise they do and ask them, do you do any physical activity, to try and quantify it? And if they do, then I'd try to explore it a little bit more about actually what do they do and how often, what are they interested in doing, and maybe would they consider increasing their physical activity levels. And that would be really important to me for a lot of different patient groups, but particularly, for example, in people with musculoskeletal problems.
Perfect. Thanks, Sarah. And Josh, kind of really to take that forward. So Sarah started to talk about how she might approach that conversation. What are the kind of factors that you'd kind of consider or need to have in place to get a positive conversation going?
Yeah, well, I think in psychological therapy, I guess one of the sort of important factors is to make sure the patient sort of trusts you, you feel like you're kind of building a rapport, making sure the patient feels safe and in a kind of space where they feel like they can talk openly. I guess these are kind of good sort of prerequisites for meaningful conversations about change. So I think those are important. I think fostering an environment where it doesn't feel like you're kind of lecturing or criticizing the person for their current activity levels, particularly if they're kind of not doing much or at all at the moment. And then that can be a really good foundation for then, again, starting these change-focused conversations, talking about what they might be able to do. And I guess understanding the reasons why maybe they're not already as active as they could be. These can be really important factors to consider when you're starting to kind of have these conversations and bring up activity within a consultation or within a course of therapy.
Okay, so I guess we've talked a little bit about how you might start a conversation and what the factors we need to consider in making sure it's a positive conversation. So Michelle, I guess it'd be useful to understand kind of how do you generally get these conversations started?
As they're coming in, making sure that you're listening to any clues that they're giving you, like maybe they're talking about stress or not being able to sleep well. In whatever consultation they've arrived in, they may talk about those factors, and sometimes it's latching on to those and talking about, inviting them to talk about physical activity and how that could help with that aspect of their health that they're having trouble with. So that you start with a brief intervention, you start small, you invite them into the conversation and then start to share with them tips and ideas based on the guidance, and make it easy for them to start with. So it's about looking at tiny changes to their habits and bringing it into their daily life, rather than talking about exercise in terms of joining things. You bring it down to the level that the patient is at, so that you raise their confidence and raise their hope in being able to achieve something.
Great. So I think that's a really nice summary that you guys have come out with in terms of different things we need to consider. So I think kind of taking that forward, and I think one of the key themes out of this is making them feel comfortable, looking at the kind of behavior change process. Where are they up to? Asking those open questions, I think Sarah's talking about. And then finally finishing, I guess, with really what does that brief intervention or advice look like